Everyone loves to slam the fees that come with condo ownership. If you've been thinking about moving to Toronto, you've probably seen this take online. Never buy a condo. The maintenance fees are a scam. But here's what almost nobody tells you. Houses have maintenance fees too. They're just invisible or not forced. Today, I'm going to compare the real long-term maintenance cost of a typical 3-bed semi-detached house to a typical 2-bed 850 square foot condo using actual replacement schedules and monthly savings targets, so you can decide what really fits your life before you buy. So homeowners love to say, well, at least I don't have to pay condo fees, but what they really mean is they don't write a singular check. Instead, they pay in broken furnaces, leaking roofs, surprise failing appliances, and emergency contractors. A responsible house owner has to self-fund all of that and more. So here's a chart of a bunch of different house components, and it's essentially a replacement schedule. So you see all the different components, you can see their average replacement cost, their typical lifespan, and then what I did is I broke it down into a monthly cost. So for example, the furnace typically right now would cost around $6,000. You replace them every, call it 18 years. And so if you needed a new furnace exactly 18 years from now, you'd have to save $28 a month to have that $6,000 available for that furnace. I've tried to identify all the main components, the ones that I think are like big ticket items in a house: furnace, AC, hot water tank, roof, windows and doors, fridge, oven, dishwasher, and then clothes washer and dryer. Those things add up to roughly $40,500. And you can see the different lifespan for each of them. It ranges anywhere from 15 to kind of 25 years. And don't get me wrong, some of these things will fail or need replacement sooner. Some of them take longer. It depends on how well they're maintained, depends on how well they're crafted, kind of depends on how lucky you get. Did you get the lemon or did you get the one that just kind of keeps going no matter what you do? And there are certain things that you can actually put off. So, for example, windows and doors. I've seen windows in houses that are like 50 years old. They're not doing a great job of keeping heat in or out, but they're windows and they exist and they're better than having no windows. So you can defer things as well. Sometimes you can't. If your furnace conks out, you have to replace it. But there are things like maybe the roof or maybe the windows and doors and stuff like that that you can put off. Looking at a monthly savings target for just those items, it's just a little bit under about $200 a month that you probably should be saving to make sure that you have an appropriate amount kind of socked away in a savings account somewhere, so that when these things come up, you're not sitting there going, oh, I need $9,000 to do the roof. You've got that money there for you. So there are some other monthly costs that you want to consider when you're owning a home and what that kind of typical monthly maintenance would be. Think about things like just kind of minor repairs, water and waste from like a utility standpoint. Same thing with gas, same thing with hydro. Routine maintenance. So like I know that we service our HVAC once a year, and you might get your gutters cleaned. You might have somebody clean your windows. Depends on your approach. But those things, my estimation, just kind of based on my own, like my family and I live in a 3-bed semi in Midtown. And, though these are our costs roughly, and they add up to about $510 a month on average, right? Our HVAC maintenance is, $600 kind of once a year, right? We've got a few different systems. So it's not like we pay $100 a month for service, but we just kind of put a little bit of money away. And then when it comes, we've got the money available to us. But you don't want to ignore those costs as well with respect to what maintenance looks like for a house. So the true house maintenance cost is around $704 a month, $194 for all your component replacement kind of schedule, $510 a month for utilities and all those other things. That's your real house fee. Now, what is not included? Notice that I didn't mention anything about like electrical and plumbing components. So like, do you have old cast iron waste pipes that eventually need to be replaced? Or do you have, aluminum wiring or knob and tube wiring or something like that? I also didn't account for pests. So if you get raccoons in your garage or squirrels in your attic or something like that, I didn't account for any kind of landscaping. A lawnmower costs a little bit of money. Snow removal, you got to buy a shovel, you got to buy salt, those kinds of things. There's a dollar cost to those kinds of things, but buying the little materials, even if you do all the work yourself. There's also a time cost to those things as well. A garage maintenance, I didn't include that. Not everybody has a garage, but if you have a garage, there's a garage door, there's the motor, just kind of, buying some lubricant for the springs, those kinds of things. The schedule that I had with the different kind of repairs and the components and all that kind of stuff is a fairly DIY approach. So I would say it represents what I believe to be your average homeowner who often likes to do a fair amount themselves, except for the things that they can't do because it requires a specialist, some kind of technical skill. And I mentioned that, there are dollar costs and time costs to those components. The other thing I wanted to mention about that kind of component replacement schedule is that some properties will have components that are brand new when you purchase them, or partway through their life expectancy, or at the end or past their life expectancy. So you have to make that adjustment based on where you're at, if you've already purchased or if you've already owned for a while. But if you're watching this and you're thinking of buying a property, you want to factor that into your monthly cost schedule in terms of where is my furnace at. If it's 10 years old, if I'm lucky, I've got another kind of 8 to 10 years, and plan accordingly. Okay, so for a condo replacement schedule for its various components, it's really just the appliances. Now, there are some condos that do have what's called a heat pump. So you've got fan coils, you've got heat pumps, which are the things that produce the hot and the cold air. If you have a heat pump, oftentimes owners are responsible for that equipment. I didn't include that equipment because heat pumps are not nearly as common as fan coils, and fan coils are often maintained by the condo building. So I left that part out. So really it's just the appliances. Don't worry, I'll get to the maintenance fees. But in terms of like what an owner is responsible for within the unit, you're looking at your appliances. So I put this basically the same number as for the house, and it's a total of $6,500. So if you're saving about $36 a month, you should have in time the amount of money that you need to replace the appliances when they need replacement. Now, other condo monthly costs, this is where I include the maintenance fees. So, for a typical 850 square foot, 2-bed, 2-bath condo, an average maintenance fee is around $722.50. Now, it certainly can be higher than that. It could potentially be a bit lower than that. I would say that average might skew a little bit on the lower side. It's not hard to find buildings where your maintenance fees are $1 a square foot or around $1 a square foot, but that's not a bad average looking at both new and older buildings. You'd probably want to save roughly $50 a month for things like minor repairs. It might not even be that much, but I think you're pretty safe if you save about $50 a month for that kind of stuff. And hydro, I estimated at about $135 a month. So your total kind of monthly costs, not including the appliance repairs, are $907.50. You add the $36 for the condo replacement, and you're looking at a true condo maintenance monthly cost of $943.50. Now, what did I not include in these things? Like houses, I didn't include pests. You're probably much less likely to have any kind of pest intrusion for your condo. So pretty safe to say that it's 0 or next to 0. Maybe you get some ants and you got to buy some ant traps, but that's about the worst of it. Pests generally, I think, are very safe to just not have to think about at all in terms of being a condo owner. So what do you get and what do you not get for what you're paying in terms of a house versus a condo? This chart has information in here that is not necessarily dollar centric, but more kind of features, if you will, of being an owner of either type of property. So when you look at amenities, if you're a condo owner, you get access to all kinds of amenities, security and concierge and an underground parking lot that's, certainly much warmer than parking on your front driveway, and gyms and pools. And I mean, it depends on what building you were in, obviously, but for the most part, most standard buildings, you have access to some kind of amenities. You pay for them, but they're convenient and all within the place where you live. If you're in a house, that is not included. So you have to do your own yard care, any kind of like fitness or recreation or anything like that, you subsidize with, private memberships, or recreation facilities and those kinds of things, or you're like building a gym, within your house in your basement or something like that. So bear that in mind. Deferred maintenance is something that I referred to before with a house. With a condo, it's a much lower risk. You pay money monthly, but then some of that money goes into a reserve fund, and that reserve fund is a pool of funds that's there to do major replacements. So you have a much lower risk in terms of like covering and taking care of those major replacement things. It's a much higher risk when you are a homeowner. So here's what I talked about earlier in the video. Owners can postpone repairs, which can lead to larger or emergency costs later. So the roof kind of needs some repair, or maybe it needs a replacement, but you don't quite have the cash. You put it off, and the next thing you know, you've got a big leak in your primary bedroom because the roof, you let it go too long, and now you've got an even bigger repair than if you just did it the year prior. So that's kind of, one issue with that. Control of capital. This is a big one that I wanted to talk about. When you are a condo owner, you pay fees monthly and your money is now gone. You have no control over it, what gets done with it, how much interest it accrues or how it gets invested or anything like that. That's kind of, for the most part, out of your hands. When you are a homeowner, you are in full control of your capital. So on one hand, while you can defer in a lot of times when that capital gets used, you can also save it or invest it, or you're in complete control of it. And so, some people really like being able to, well, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to put it into a GIC. I'm not going to need a new roof for the next year for sure. And so I'll put it into a GIC making X dollars or whatever, and then it'll be free and liquid, 12 months from now. It's a decent option as a homeowner for sure. Freedom to renovate. With a condo, it's a little bit limited. You do have to, in a lot of cases, ask for permission depending on what kind of renovation you need to do. If it's cosmetic, not really. But if you're doing something like floors, if you're introducing any kind of like new plumbing or electrical component or something like that, you need to get the board to sign off. If you are a homeowner, then you can pretty much do whatever you want. If you're in a semi-detached, there might be some kind of conversation with your neighbor, maybe letting them know that you're going to do certain stuff. If you wanted to dig down, there's a little bit of issues with, party wall and footings and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, you can do kind of whatever you want. Lifestyle and effort. Condo ownership is definitely a low maintenance lifestyle. You don't have to do any of the yard work and the shoveling and the salting and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to, for the most part, call contractors to replace the windows or to look at the boiler or whatever. It's all hands-free. And with a house, you have to coordinate all of that, right? All of the contractors, all of the work. Maybe you're doing some of the work yourself. So, that's something to consider. Lastly, privacy and noise. So when you're in a condo, you've got your own space, but you might hear people walking around in, hard-heeled shoes above you. You might hear people talking in the hallway. Hopefully you're not hearing people through your walls on either side. And, you're in close proximity to a lot of people. It's very dense living versus a house. You have much more kind of privacy and space. In a semi, there's going to be a little bit less, right? You have a shared wall, and depending on what the material is between the two houses, can you hear people talking? Can you hear doors close? All that kind of stuff. But it's certainly much, much more private than being a condo owner. If you're trying to decide whether a condo or a house makes sense for your move to Toronto and you want help choosing the right type of home, condo, townhouse, house, based on how you actually live, you can book a call with me below. I'm Jamie Harnish. This is Toronto Home Search, and this is how you avoid making the wrong move before you ever buy.